Okay, this is on. Good stuff. I think let's just pray before we get into the word this morning. Father, we just thank you for this time of worship and thank you for your presence today. And I pray, God, that as we go into the word now, that you'd open our hearts to receive from you. I pray, God, that you'd help us to focus on what you have to say to us today. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so if you have a Bible, okay, yeah, she can go to kids' church if she wants. Yeah, kids are out, so you can take her. All right, so if you have a Bible, you can take it out or your device. And I'm going to be, I don't have one main text. I often have one main text when I preach. I suppose it depends if I'm preaching an expository sermon or a topical sermon. Normally, if I'm preaching a topical sermon, I jump around between different scriptures, and that's what I'm going to be doing today. So it might be more helpful to have a pen and paper in hand, or your some kind of a notebook where you can just write down the scriptures and go back to them and meditate on them. But I want to just start off this message today by saying that today, in today's world, here's my book. In today's world, we are more connected than we have ever been before. We have access to people all over the world through social media and through various technological tools. Yet more and more people are reporting that they are feeling lonely and disconnected from the world around them. In May 2018, a survey was done where they asked thousands of Americans over the age of 18 about their feelings of loneliness. And I want to share with you some of the results that they found. Okay. All right. It's easy to get distracted in this place, huh? I'm just one of those people where I get easily distracted. So I'm like, hey, look, a squirrel, That's just the way I am. So, but we do love the kids. And so they did this survey, and I wanted to share with you some of the findings that they found. They say nearly half of Americans report sometimes or always feeling alone. That's 46%. 1 in 4 Americans, that's 27%, rarely or never feel as though there are people who really understand them. 2 in 5 Americans sometimes or always feel that their relationships are not meaningful. That's 43%. 1 in 5 people report they rarely or never feel close to people. That's 20%. Or feel like they are people they can talk to. That's 18%. Only around half of Americans, that's 53%, have meaningful in-person social interactions, such as having an extended conversation with a friend or spending quality time with family on a daily basis. Now, of course, these are American statistics, but I think we can learn from American statistics. I want to share something else with you. In another study, they said the average American's number of close confidants, those are people that you can share with and be open with, has been shrinking. Adults in the U.S. had 3 confidants in 1985 compared to just 2 in 2004, and approximately 1 in 4 Americans report having no close confidence in 2004. That's an almost 3-fold increase from 1985. I was born in 84. The survey released in 2020 found that 71% of millennials and almost 79%, that's a high number, of Gen Z respondents report feeling lonely, a significantly greater proportion than other generations. So this is something that's very prevalent among young people. And so based on these findings, it's clear that loneliness and disconnection has been on the increase, and it's been on the increase for quite some time. There was an article in the Time magazine in 2015 titled, "Why Loneliness May Be the Next Big Health Issue." And so, like I say, this is not something new. This is something that's been building over decades. And so my question is, why has this been on the increase? Why are people feeling more and more lonely and disconnected and isolated? And I'm, of course, I'm not a psychologist, I'm no expert, but there's two things that I could think of, and I'm sure there are other reasons as well. But I think, in my opinion, I think that internet usage and technology is one of the biggest contributors to this. Of course, technology has amazing benefits. It simplifies our lives. It helps us to get things done. However, on the downside, it can sever our contact with people and prevent us from having meaningful relationships. The other reason, I think, is this emphasis on individualism in Western cultures. In the BBC Loneliness Experiment, they surveyed about 237 people from different countries, islands, and territories. And they found that, I thought this was quite interesting, that they found that the most vulnerable were young men in individualistic cultures. I find that quite fascinating. And so these are just two reasons that I could think of. And like I say, I'm sure there's other contributing factors. But the point that I'm trying to make is that our culture has been growing in disconnect for quite some time. And I think that the pandemic has exacerbated the problem. The pandemic has caused us to retreat from each other even more than we did in the past, creating even more isolation and disconnection. Just look at what's happening in our country right now with COVID. COVID's on the increase. I've got friends in Joburg that are telling me about what's happening in Joburg. COVID is spreading like crazy there at the moment. And I think COVID is causing so much disconnection. It's causing disconnection in the workplace. It's causing disconnection in our families, in our social circles, and even right here within our church family. How many of you feel disconnected right now to some degree? I do. Even just having to sit here with a mask on my face and having to socially distance myself from you makes me feel disconnected from you to a certain degree. Wouldn't you agree? How many of you miss what we had before? I do. How many of you miss the human interaction we had before? The hugs, the kisses. Paul, I promise not to kiss you. The hugs, the kisses, the handshakes, the warm embraces. How many of you miss that? I do. And you know what? We are not the first humans in history to feel this way. This is not the first time. Now, Paul the Apostle knew what it was like to miss what he had before, to miss the human contact that he had before. And Paul was chucked into prison several times during his ministry. And Paul says in 2 Timothy 1 verse 4, he says, I know that you have wept for me, your spiritual father, and your tears are dear to me. I can't wait to see you again. That sounds like a man that misses his people. And of course, where did Paul write this from? He wrote this from prison. And so Paul knew what it was like to be disconnected and lonely, cut off from people. And I want to say to you today that I think many of us have grieved the loss of that connection. And that there's nothing wrong with missing that connection that you once had. Because you are wired for connection. That's how God made you. It doesn't matter whether you are an extrovert or an introvert or an ambivert. You are wired for connection. In fact, we need connection. It's been scientifically proven that that human connection is vital for your mental health. And not just that, it's vital for your physical well-being. We need connection. And so my question that I want to ask today is, how do we cultivate much-needed connection in a disconnected world. In a world that's facing all the challenges that COVID presents at this time. And I think that, and I want to offer two solutions. And the first thing is that I think that in order to cultivate connection, we have to think out of the box. I want to read Acts 8 verse 1 to you. It says, "Now Saul agreed to be an accomplice to Stephen's stoning and participated in his execution. From that day on, a great persecution of the church in Jerusalem began. All the believers scattered into the countryside of Judea and among the Samaritans." And so after Stephen was killed, fierce persecution broke out against the church. Christians were imprisoned, Christians were attacked, Christians were driven out of the city. And so their normal way of life, their normal way of doing church, their normal way of interacting with other people had been interrupted by something that was out of their control. Now, doesn't that sound all too familiar? Eh? We've had no control of what's been happening with this COVID pandemic. And normally these Christians that we read about in Acts 8, they would meet in each other's homes and they would go to the temple, but their regular pattern which they had established had been interrupted. And so they were forced to think out of the box. They had no choice. And are we not in a similar position right now? We are sailing through uncharted waters. And we are going to have to think out of the box in order to cultivate connection. Do you agree? You know, the church worldwide has been extremely creative in this season, which has been so refreshing to see. You know, I follow a number of churches on Facebook, vineyard churches and non-vineyard churches, etc., etc. And it's been nice to kind of, keep an eye on what they've been doing. And it's been, like I said, it's been wonderfully refreshing to see what they have been doing. I've been seeing churches having outdoor meetings. I saw one church, they had this thing where cars could drive through onto the church premises, and they were given free coffees, and people received prayer while they sat in their cars. I spoke to Dave Skevington from Fountain. We saw him and his wife Sarah in PE yesterday, and they're busy doing Alpha Online. And they were saying that apparently Alpha Online has been amazing. That's out of the box. You think of our church. Before the pandemic, we never used to record our sermons and put them on YouTube. It's something we're doing. We had never used Zoom before. And so it's amazing to see how the church is being so creative in this season. And so my question to you is what creative ideas can you think of to cultivate connection in this season? Before I move on to my next point, I want to say something about Acts 8. And what stands out to me is that now hear what I'm saying. God did not cause the persecution, but God used the persecution to get the church of that time to do what Jesus had told them to do. If you go back to Acts 1 verse 8, what did Jesus say? You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the end of the earth. The persecution was used by God to shake the church and get them moving. And right now, the church is being shaken. Everything is being shaken. The world is being shaken. And perhaps God is moving His church in a new direction. I think that one of the things that if you think about that, when this church was persecuted, they were forced out of the building, right? And they carried the good news of Jesus Christ with them wherever they went. And I think that one of the things that God is doing in the season is He's making us look outwards, right? He's giving us an outward focus. It's incredible to see the evangelistic efforts that are going on at this time. And so God is moving despite our difficult circumstances. I think in the church we can get so used to doing things a certain way. It's so easy to get caught up in the trap of going through the motions of doing church without intentionality or purpose. And I think that this pandemic has caused the church to take a hard look at itself. It's caused us to do some self-examination. This might sound like I'm going off topic here, but another part, I was listening to Chris Valentin from Bethel recently, and he used the analogy of a space rocket. And when a space rocket is launched into space, it's got boosters on its sides that shoots it up. And once the fuel is used up in those boosters, it detaches from the rocket. And those boosters plummet back to Earth. Why? Because the fuel is no longer needed. And what's the point? Well, what was useful in the last season may not be useful in this season. There may be things that we need to let go of. And that applies to the church, but not just to the church. It applies to everything. It applies to our personal lives. It could apply to business. It could apply to various sectors. And I think that this is a pruning season for sure. I think God is lopping off branches that are not meant to be there anymore, and He's adding new branches. I think God is placing our focus on what is most important right now. Last Sunday I didn't share this. I had a number of words, but I just didn't feel to share this one. But today I do. And last Sunday I had a picture of trees being blown in the wind from side to side. And I felt God say that the wind represents the Holy Spirit. And those trees, they blew in the wind. And you know what? In the season, we must not resist the new thing that God is doing. It's so easy to resist, to put our heels in the ground and say, "No, Lord." Are we willing to go with the Spirit, to be blown by the Spirit to where He wants to take us to? You know what? Good fruit can come from the season we are in. As terrible as it is, as horrific as it is, good fruit can come from the season. When Paul wrote to the Philippians, he wrote from prison. Like I said, he was in jail a few times. And in Philippians 1 verse 12, he says, "Now I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me," I love these words, "has really served to advance the gospel." Isn't that amazing? From a prison. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. You know what? Paul was in prison for a long time. And the Christians were becoming discouraged. Right? Doesn't that sound all too familiar? Hasn't this pandemic been going on for quite some time? I don't think many of us predicted that this pandemic would be around for this long. But it's still here. Paul had been in prison for a long time. And so Paul encourages those Christians and tells them how his imprisonment has been used by God to advance the gospel. Paul tells them that he's been able to share the good news of Jesus Christ with people he would not be able to reach otherwise. And so what opportunities have presented themselves to you in this unique season that would not be available to you otherwise? Now we are, of course, picking in the valley right now. What good fruit is being produced in this season? We need to encourage each other to see the light amidst the darkness. Isn't that what Paul did? Hey? So number one is think out the box. How do we cultivate connection? Think out the box. The second one is cultivating connection takes commitment. I'm spending a lot of time talking about Paul this morning. He wrote quite a bit of the New Testament, so I end up talking about him a lot. But Paul traveled great distances in his ministry. And I want to read to you from the Moody Atlas of Bible lands. It says, the distances traveled by the Apostle Paul are nothing short of staggering. In point of fact, the New Testament registers the equivalent of about 13,400 miles. That's over 21,000 kilometers that the great apostle journeyed. Considering the means of transportation available in the Roman world, the average distance traveled by day, the primitive paths, and rugged, sometimes mountainous terrain over which he had to venture, the sheer expedition of the apostles' physical energy becomes unfathomable for us. Accordingly, Paul's commitment to the Lord entailed a spiritual vitality that is inextricably joined to a superlative level of physical stamina and fearless courage. That's amazing. Paul showed a fierce commitment to connection. You know what, let me just say this. We are also called to commit to connection. And maybe you're getting tired. I know it's mid-year. Maybe you're getting tired. Maybe you're wondering, is it worth putting in the effort to connect like we are doing under the current circumstances? Maybe you're tired of having to sit here with a mask on your face. Maybe you're tired of Zoom meetings. And I get that. But once again, the challenges we are facing do not compare to what Paul faced. Think about it. Paul walked thousands of kilometers to connect with Christian communities. He faced persecution and he faced imprisonment, yet he was committed to connection. Last week I read to you Hebrews 10 verse 25, which says, let us not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another. And last week I shared that with you, but I gave you no context in that verse. And basically the author of Hebrews, he writes these words to Christians who are being persecuted. They were being persecuted by the Romans, and some of them were reluctant to meet together. And so those Christians that decided to continue to cultivate connection during that time of persecution showed an unusually strong commitment to connection. And so may we be inspired by Paul's commitment and the early church's commitment to connection and make the effort. And once again, like I said last week, we are living in very unusual times. And I'm not putting pressure on anybody to come to church. I know some of our people have comorbidities. Some folk have health risks, and they just can't risk meeting with us right now. We are not putting pressure on anybody right now. And so what am I saying to you? I'm saying do what you can to cultivate connection in this season. How can you show commitment to connection in this season? What does that look like for you? Of course, you guys are here today, and obviously you feel comfortable being here at a Sunday gathering, and this would probably apply more to people that are not here. But how can you show commitment to connection in this peculiar season? How can we go the extra mile? You know, I was talking to Gavin Marie recently, and he told me about some of the things that they are doing in their church to cultivate connection. And like I said, they're thinking out the box. And some of the guys have started a running group at their church, which is great because you're outside, you're not indoors, it's pretty safe. And these guys, they'll go for a run, and when they finish, they get together and somebody shares a word, right? That's out of the box thinking, hey? And so that's something that works for them. What can work for you in this season? You know, I'm going to pick on Mark and Helen. So their small group is meeting on Zoom, right? They've started meeting on Zoom again. How about joining their Zoom meeting, you know, for people that aren't comfortable meeting in gatherings right now? And you might say, well, I don't like Zoom. I'm an introvert. I get all that. But once again, how committed are we going to be to connection in the season? This might be, I'm thinking of the Acts church when they were persecuted. Like I said, it was an opportunity to try new things. And this may be an opportunity right now in the season to try new things, to maybe start new small groups. They could be in person. They don't have to be in person. They could be Zoom meetings. What fresh new initiative can we take in this season? I want to finish off by asking the question: why do we need connection? I recently read a book it's here. It's called Get Your Life Back by John Elridge. And I want to read to you from one page here. And in this chapter, he speaks about the interconnectedness of trees, which I found quite interesting. He says, when one tree in a forest is diseased, the other trees will send critical nutrition to it through the interconnection of the root system and fungi network in the forest floor, supporting the ill tree until it is well again. Trees will also communicate with one another in this way. If a foreign invader like a beetle bores into one tree, that tree will send signals through the hidden connection in the humus, warning the others that an enemy has come. The forest responds by producing immune defenses, which they send up through their trunks and into their leaves. Walking through a forest, the trees appear to be individuals, and they are, but there's an unseen shared life hidden from view, a connection of life and being I find beautiful and extraordinary. We can learn something from that. We can learn something from the forest. We can learn something from the trees. As the trees depend on each other, as they are interconnected, we depend on each other, whether we like it or not. We are interconnected. One person said, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. Can I read that again? The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. And maybe you're one of those people. This is, I think this pandemic has been very tough for many of us. I think it's been a very isolating season for many of us. And maybe on the outside, as you sit here, you appear calm. It seems like you put together, but maybe on the inside you're feeling desperate. Maybe you're feeling isolated and disconnected. Maybe you're longing for connection. Perhaps it's the connection that you had once upon a time before the pandemic. Perhaps you just need somebody to notice you and show interest in you. Perhaps you need somebody to listen to you and show you some care. Maybe you need somebody to grieve with you or perhaps rejoice with you. I want to finish off by reading a few scriptures. Hebrews 3 verse 13 says, encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today. 1 Thessalonians 5:11, encourage one another and build each other up. Galatians 6 verse 2, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. And so I want to just close by asking, is there anybody here today who maybe you're feeling isolated, you're feeling lonely, you're feeling disconnected, you're longing for connection? I want to just ask you just to close your eyes. Just close your eyes.